Corridors Part 3, Incursion.
As Ambassador Evans left the throne room, First Prelate Ewardian answered the incoming transmission. It was an automated real-time stream of data generated by the listening posts in the Wiyan system. His 4 eyes narrowed in shock, and his crest stood on end as he read the message. Forsaken fleet detected in Wiyan system. Detecting 1 dreadnought, 5 void blades, 15 shadow spikes. ETA to Wiyan colony, 0.5 rotations. Powering defense network. Orbital photon lances. Online. Planetary shield. Online. Balance point 1. Weapons array. Active. Balance point 2. Weapons array. Active. A vanguard force. Prelate Ewardian stopped reading the stream and accessed the war nexus. His digits moved quickly over his console as he tried to get into contact with War Ambassador Raxon in the Renteller star cluster. Thankfully, he answered.
1,000 victories to you, Prelate Ewardian. I assume this is about the Wiyan system incursion?
War Ambassador Raxon fluttered his insectoid wings in impatience.
1,000 victories to you, Ambassador. I am calling to inform you that I will be sending the 3rd Onathin fleet to support your defenses in the Wiyan system.
Prelate Ewardian's digits activated more controls, giving orders to the 125 ships stationed above the Cretith homeworld.
The Forsaken aim to distract us and want us to pull forces out of the Renteller star cluster.
That does seem to be their strategy. Even so, the 3rd Onathin fleet will require almost a rotation to travel to the Wiyan system.
The Cretith gnashed his mandibles.
How did the Forsaken find their way into the Cretith home cluster?
That knowledge also escapes me, friend. Be safe in the Renteller star cluster, and may your enemies fall before you.
Prelate Ewardian watched as Raxon nodded his antennae and cut the transmission. He pulled up the real-time data stream from the listening post again. Balance point 6 weapons array. Active. Cretith Dominion ships reporting. 1515 swarm ships, ready. Detecting approaching ships. Signature. Onathins sovereignty. 5 nest ships, 20 predators, 100 talon shards. ETA. 0.85 rotations. Colony power distribution set to defensive mode. Planet-side ion cannons. Online. Listening post 5 destroyed. Listening post 4D. The feed cut out. Prelate Ewardian closed his eyes and hoped that the Wiyan system defenses could hold out until the 3rd fleet arrives. Brigadier General Xander Davis stood silently on the bridge of the Relativity, a research vessel parked several million kilometers above the Sol system asteroid belt. The Relativity was a sleek vessel, sporting 2 large cargo holds filled with various scientific instruments towards the mid-rear section of the ship, and 1 large interstellar engine in the very back. The bridge and living quarters were in the front of the ship, which was currently pointing directly at an interstellar communication anchor, several thousand kilometers away. Beneath them, General Davis saw hundreds of figures buzzing around in the asteroid belt. He watched as mining ships delivered ore to cargo ships, which zipped to ore processing ships. Drones constantly retrieved the processed ingots and components, and delivered them to astronauts. General Davis surveyed the entire 1,000-kilometer-long strip of the asteroid belt and could see the forge slowly taking shape as these astronauts welded the processed components according to a schematic that was displayed on their personnel, heads-up display within their helmets. His heart swelled with pride as he watched humanity construct their first dedicated shipyard in the Sol system. An incessant beep broke his reverie. He activated some controls on the bridge and answered the interstellar transmission. Ambassador Evans' face swam onto the view screen.
Hello, Ambassador. I take it you managed to convince Prelate Ewardian to permit you to launch the comm anchor?
General Davis asked.
That's correct, sir. I was unable to acquire permission to launch the Pathfinder probe in the Onathins system. However, the prelate allowed me to launch it in the Sakala system.
The ambassador informed.
That's quite all right.
General Davis stated.
It was a long shot anyways, and we'd always figured Sakala would be best. When can we expect you to launch the probe?
Well, my pilot Alan says that we can probably make it back to Sakala in about 2 weeks. He says we're a lot lighter now that we've launched the comm anchor and have burned off a lot of fuel.
Very well. I'll be here waiting in 2 weeks' time. Good luck on the Pathfinder project.
General Davis nodded encouragingly.
Thank you, sir. We'll talk again in a couple weeks. Oh, wait. Jeremy has something to say to Diana.
Dr. Jeremy Godwin's face forced itself into the view screen.
Diana, I found the most wondrous thing.
A red-haired woman stepped out of the cargo hold with a tablet in hand. General Davis had nearly forgotten that she was in there, conducting some experiments while waiting on the Pathfinder probe launch.
There you are. Here, look at this.
Jeremy brandished his silver triangular prism, ostentatiously pointing out the floating objects inside.
Astonishing.
Diana remarked.
An Onathin lava lamp. How does it work?
I'm sending you the data that I've collected over the comm anchor now. Look at the data and tell me your conclusion. I don't want to bias you.
Jeremy waited in rapt anticipation. General Davis was slightly amused at the exchange. After a few moments of looking down at her tablet, Diana jolted her head back up.
An anti-gravity field? What? How? This is amazing. We must study this further. Just think of the potential applications.
Whoa. Hold on a sec there.
General Davis held out his hands.
We have to focus on the Pathfinder project first.
Oh, that'll work. No problem. There may need to be some minor corrections, but that's nothing Derek Yane can't handle.
Jeremy dismissed and gestured to the toy again.
But this, if we study this further, we could make anti-gravity cargo lifts to move ore and heavy equipment around with ease.
We could develop power armor for added strength for our soldiers.
Diana added.
Or develop mining suits to protect our workers from accidental falls or falling rocks.
But perhaps the most important innovation.
Jeremy started.
With the most immediate benefit.
Diana continued.
Our space elevators.
Our space elevators.
They said in unison.
Oh.
General Davis said, dumbfounded. Then a grin stretched across his face. Space elevators would accelerate everything. Wardrow Nightstacks unfurled his wings, stretched, and refolded his wings again. He stared angrily at the incoming Forsaken vanguard while moistening his thorax in preparation for the upcoming fight. He activated the inter-ship communication webbing on his ship and addressed the other swarm ships.
Battle drones. How the enemy have found their way to our homes matters not. What matters is that they fall by our claw. Let our mandibles tear out their throats. The hive will be protected.
For the hive, the battle drones answered. Wardrow Nightstack surveyed the battlefield from his swarm ship. He ordered the other 14 swarm ships orbiting Wiyan to place themselves behind the 2 orbital photon lances that hung in orbit over the planet. The Forsaken Vanguard force was approaching on a trajectory that would take them out of range of all but one balance point weapons array. They would focus on that weapons array first, Ixtax thought. There was nothing they could do about that, since the array was more than halfway across the solar system, closer to the Forsaken Armada than to the planet. The best Ixtax could hope for is that the automated weapons array would take out most, or all of the Forsaken, and make his job easier. He studied his console as the weapons array began streaming its battle report in real time. The Forsaken fleet is in range. Firing photon lances 1 through 5. Incoming Shadow Spike fighters. Deploying anti-fighter bile canisters. Confirmed 3 Shadow Spikes destroyed, 2 Void Blades damaged. Recharging photon lances 1 through 5. Firing photon lances 6 through 10. Incoming Dreadnought fire. Damage to anterior hull plating. Photon lances 4 through 8 destroyed. Firing photon lances 1 through 3. Confirmed 1 Void Blade destroyed. Incoming Void Blade fire. Ventral hull plating destroyed. Photon lances 9 through 10 destroyed. Recharging photon lances 1 through 3. Incoming Dreadnought fire. Dorsal hull plating destroyed. Photon Lances 2 through 3 destroyed. Firing Photon Lance 1. Confirmed 1 Shadow Spike destroyed. Minor damage to enemy Dreadnought. Incoming Voidblade Phi. The weapons array was gone. Wardrow Nightstack squinted into the distance and could make out tiny shapes that were quickly growing bigger. The first thing he recognized was the large Dreadnought, a capital ship fitted with numerous arrays of turrets and gunports, surrounded by seemingly impenetrable black armor. The massive ship was propelled by a pair of glowing engines in the rear and revealed no obvious command bridge. The sleek lines of the large craft made it difficult to see against the black of space. The void blades that escorted the Dreadnought were of a similar design. Painted black, the flat, vertical void blades were armed with a pair of high-powered laser turrets on each end of its crescent-shaped hull. Although smaller than the Dreadnought, the void blade cruisers still dwarfed the Shadowpoint fighters that accompanied them. Sleek and black, the dart-like Shadowpoint fighters were almost impossible to find without the aid of active proximity sensors. As the Forsaken flew closer, the orbital photon lances began to whir to life.
For the hive!
Ixtax shrilled into the intership comm webbing again, and was answered in kind. The twin orbital photon lances acquired a targeting solution and hurled a pair of white-hot streaks of light into the Forsaken fleet. Wardrone Ixtax's comm webbing informed him of the destruction of 1 Void Blade and 2 Shadow Spike fighters. Moments later, he was greeted by a pair of explosions in the Forsaken fleet. Those fighters and Void Blades are protecting the Dreadnought from the lances. He gnashed his mandibles at the thought. The Forsaken fleet pressed forward, with the 9 remaining Shadow Spike fighters leading the charge. The remaining 3 Void Blades escorted the slower, more powerful Dreadnought. As the orbital photon lances began recharging, Wardoni Ixtax ordered his swarm ships to advance and engage the 9 remaining Shadow Spikes.
We must keep the Forsaken fighters away from the photon lances.
The small wing of 15 swarm ships engaged their engines and chased after the Shadow Spikes, firing yellow bursts of collimated plasma. Streams of blue pulses followed in their wake as the planetside ion cannons opened fire on the Forsaken. Wardrone Ixtax's webbing vibrated as clicks, growls, and whistles dominated the comm network. He guided his swarm ship fighter through the chaotic dogfight over Wiyan, dodging the purple bursts emanating from the Shadow Spikes. An explosion just off to the port side blinded him temporarily. He growled in anger as he sharply pulled his fighter away from a collision with a Shadow Spike, but not before sending 4 pulses of plasma into the enemy fighter and destroying it. He momentarily dropped his inertial dampeners, riding the shockwave forward before re-engaging his engines and dampeners right onto the tail of another Shadow Spike. Another swarm ship joined him in his chase, and together they hunted down the Shadow Spike and destroyed it. The flash from the exploded Shadow Spike obscured a waiting Void Blade, which lashed out a violet beam of light, slicing the other swarm ship to pieces. Ixtax cursed as he rolled his fighter away from the Void Blade, weaving in and out of the ships and wreckage in his way. He didn't want to be anywhere nearby if the orbital photon lances decided to attack that Void Blade. Ixtax jolted in his harness as a shot impacted his ventral armor. Damage to ventral armor. Engines at 65%. Ixtax twisted his fighter downwards towards the planet. He dodged the blue flashes streaming towards him, and saw the flash of an explosion behind him as the Shadow Spike tailing him was obliterated by the ion cannon fire. His relief was interrupted by an overwhelmingly brilliant flash. Gripping the steering webs, he somehow managed to avoid being shot down by the planetside ion cannons himself. He checked his proximity sensors to find that the Dreadnought had fired upon one of the orbital photon lances, utterly destroying it. A pillar of light answered the Dreadnought's assault as the remaining photon lance finally discharged its energy. The stream of photons melted through another Void Blade and destroyed the rear engines of the Dreadnought. It ground to a halt just above planetary orbit, leaking fuel and leaving dark vortices in its wake. Wardrone Ixtax watched as the Dreadnought transferred all of the power from its engines to its weapons, and began to fire an onslaught of dark red pulses at the planet. The pulses detonated above the colony as they impacted the planetary shield, sending shockwaves rippling through the upper atmosphere. He activated the comm webbing.
Battle drones to me. Leave the Shadow Spikes. We must destroy the Void Blades and protect the remaining photon lance.
Only 4 swarm ships answered his summons, joining him on a final run at the two damaged void blades slowly limping towards the photon lance. 3 shadow spikes began tailing the swarm ships, but were annihilated by ion cannon fire. 3 more shadow spikes exploded while trying to stop the swarm ship's approach. Closing in on the first void blade, the swarm ships fired a concentrated stream of plasma pulses at the weapon systems of the Forsaken cruiser. Small explosions erupted along the outer hull, completely engulfing the turrets of the cruiser. The other void blade turned towards the Kretith fighter squadron, reaching out with twin lasers and carving 3 swarm ships into the wreckage. Ixtac screeched as he pulled his fighter upwards, sustaining grazing damage from the deadly laser. Damage to anterior and dorsal hull plating. Weapons offline. The void blade turned again, facing the recharging photon lance. It precisely targeted and sliced through the generator, triggering massive secondary explosions that blinded Ixtac again. The photon lance was destroyed. The ion cannons did not have the firepower to destroy the dreadnought outside of orbit. There was nothing left in the system to destroy the dreadnought, except perhaps an overloaded interstellar engine. Wardrone Ixtac flattened his antennae in grim determination and pointed his ship towards the damaged dreadnought and accelerated. The dreadnought enlarged alarmingly fast and quickly filled his entire view.
For the hive!
He screeched into space. 5 dazzling pillars of light sliced through the massive dreadnought, illuminating the black ship with white fury. Ixtac yanked at the controls again, narrowly avoiding the massive explosion. He dodged through the wreckage, the shards of metal, and the floating dead to find 5 Onathin nest ships hanging above the gutted dreadnought. Talon shards were already deploying out of the nest ships, and made quick work of the remaining void blades. A formal chirp came through the comm webbing.
Apologies for the late arrival, Wardrone Ixtac. The 3rd Onathin Fleet stands ready to render any assistance.